there! My name is Robin, and welcome to English Grammar Now. Today, we're talking about, come on, join in. These are phrasal verbs. First, let's talk about what are phrasal verbs. A phrasal verb is a multi-word verb. Multi means many. So it's made up of a verb and one or two particles or prepositions. Don't worry if you don't know the difference between a particle or a preposition for now. Here's a few examples of phrasal verbs. Get along, find out, break into, look at, watch out for. So first of all, we have some phrasal verbs that we can figure out if we know the meanings of the words that we're using. If we know the verb and the preposition, we can understand the meaning. Here's 3 sentences with phrasal verbs that we can pretty much understand. The first one, could you please move over? If we know the verb move, over is just showing us the direction sideways. In the second one, everyone should take off their shoes. We know that shoes can go on and off, so off is showing that they should be removed. In the third one, someone broke into my car. If we know the verb break, into is showing the direction that they went, inside the car. That's unfortunate. But we have to be very careful with phrasal verbs because there are many that cannot be understood simply by looking at the words that are used. For example, the phrasal verb make up has 3 possible meanings depending on the sentence and the context. First of all, make up could mean to invent or create something that didn't exist. For example, I didn't know the answer, so I just made something up. It could also mean to reconcile after a fight. You could use a sentence like this. I'm glad to hear that Tanya and Sean have made up. They were fighting, and now they're not anymore. The third way this could be used is to talk about preparing something, especially a bed or a guest room. An example sentence might be, I'll make up the spare room for you tonight. So even though we know the words make and up, we can't always guess the meaning of a phrasal verb. In some cases, a phrasal verb will have a one-word synonym, a word that means the same thing. If this is true, usually the one-word synonym is more formal than the phrasal verb. The phrasal verb will be a little less formal. Here's some examples of that. If we say, Susan will send out the memo tonight, that's less formal than saying, Susan will distribute the memo tonight. If we say, we'll sort out the problem, a more formal way to say it is, we'll resolve the problem. We could say, you should go on without me. But a more formal way is, you should continue without me. We could say, I found out where you left the remote. More formal would be, I discovered where you left the remote. So the highlighted words have the same meaning, but the one-word synonym is a little more formal. Here's an activity for you to try it out. If you already know the meaning of some of these words, you can probably do this quite easily, or you might have to use a dictionary. For each of the words that is highlighted in the sentence, the phrasal verbs, they match with the words in the box. See if you can figure out which of these one-word synonyms belongs in each of these sentences. Go ahead, give it a try. Here's the answers to that matching question. So for each of these, we can use either the phrasal verb or the one-word synonym, but we would not use both. so I've put the one-word synonym in brackets. For sentence 1, we could say, he kept on running down the street after the bus. More formally, he continued running down the street after the bus. Number 2, instead of saying copy out, we could say, the students had to reproduce the text by hand. Number 3, instead of saying take up, we could say, my father wants to start fishing. He's never done it before. For number 4, instead of saying give back, we could say, you can return the book when you've finished reading. And for number 5, instead of saying taking out, we could say, Mom is good at removing splinters. So for each of these phrasal verbs, we have a one-word synonym. There is not always a synonym, but in this case, they help us be a little more formal. You may have noticed that some phrasal verbs have an object either between the verb and the particle or after. Here's some examples. We have a sentence like, I'd like to ask you for some help. You is the object of the verb ask. But we also have the preposition for coming after the object. Sometimes a phrasal verb can either have an object or not have an object. For example, what time did you wake up? No object. Or, can you wake me up at 7 p.m.? The object is me. Some phrasal verbs are very flexible and you can put the object either in the middle or after the phrasal verb, like these. It's warm enough to take off your coat. It's warm enough to take your coat off. The meaning is the same in both sentences. Although there are so many phrasal verbs that we could use, these are some examples of the most commonly used ones. I'd recommend that you memorize these. We have ask someone for something, belong to someone, happen to, speak or talk to someone about something, thank someone for something. And here's a few more. Think about something, wait for something or someone, listen to something or someone, look at something or someone. Now, look at means where your eyes are looking, but we also have look for something or someone, which is when you can't find something, you will look for it. I hope you can remember those very common phrasal verbs because now we're going to see what you can do. In each of these sentences, the verb is already in the sentence, but what's missing is the particle or preposition that comes after it. Can you remember the common phrasal verbs we just studied? See if you can put the correct particle in each blank. Go ahead, give it a try. Here's the answers to those blanks. Number 1, we waited for the bus for almost an hour. Number 2, I've been thinking about getting a job. Number 3, I'm concerned that he never talks to anyone in his class. Number 4, look at me when I'm talking to you. Number 5, have you listened to the album I sent you? Number 6, what's happened to my backpack? I've been looking for it everywhere, but I can't find it. Now let's take a look at a little story that uses these phrasal verbs. You might need to guess some of the meanings or look them up in a dictionary. You'll never believe what happened to me this morning. I set off at 7 a.m. as usual and had to fill up the car with gas on the way to work. But just as I turned onto the highway, the car broke down. At first, I freaked out, but once I calmed down, I got on the phone and called for my brother to come get me. He said he'd look into some repairs and come back when I got off work. He takes such good care of me. Look at all these phrasal verbs in this story. So, as we've learned, sometimes you can guess the meaning based on your knowledge of the words that we're using, the verb and the particle. But sometimes you have to learn a little bit about the phrase. You might have to go to a dictionary or look it up online. This takes a lot of practice, but if you start practicing with those common phrasal verbs, it will help you out a lot when you're speaking and writing. Thank you so much for studying with me. I'll see you again next time. Goodbye!